Hello, this is Jo North again with the second Mindkind podcast, helping parents to think about their children's mental health. As usual, we're going to be answering questions that parents have sent to me. And this week, we're going to be looking at emotions and the importance of emotional literacy in the home and in your parenting. So I'm really looking forward to telling you all about this. So this is chapter 3 in the book Mindkind and available on Amazon. You can find the book link in the podcast description. I'm hearing from people that they're experiencing a lot of emotion at this time. This is March 2021 and we're coming out of lockdown and a COVID pandemic, and it's affected people very deeply. It's affected children too. And although on the surface we're just getting on with life and we're trying to get through the best we can, what I start to hear are children's emotions and adults' emotions telling them that they're not feeling quite right, and communicating, really saying, I'm really struggling with this. And I started to notice it in all sorts of places. So the other day I was walking through the supermarket and with my mask on, and I don't know if you've ever noticed that the supermarket is a wonderful place for children's emotions. They seem to get very excited by that great big space, all of those products, and they get overstimulated, and you have all sorts of scenarios emerging, ranging from the 2-year-old collapsing on the floor and having a protest because he can't have a great big bag of 16 bags of crisps, to young teenagers wanting to get things from the makeup stall, and all of this great sort of wonderful rich tapestry of human activity and emotion. The other day I was walking through and I heard a little boy. He was about 3 and he was crying, and it was the most heart-rending sound to hear him crying. And his mum was with him and she was doing a very good job of managing his emotions. And what I heard was this saddest tone, and he was telling his mum that when he got home he was telling his dad because she wouldn't let him have a particular product. I noticed the incredible impact that it had on me, and I walked away because it wasn't my business. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go back and check. So I walked down the aisle and went back again and saw the same little boy with his same mum doing her very, very best with him, overjoyed because he'd found a new product that was of great interest. And the intense sadness that really affected me had gone away and he'd moved on. Okay, so I'm using this example because it's a really common example of the way children function, that their states of mind are fluid and they move on pretty quickly, especially if they're given the right support. And and it really matters. Emotion really matters. If we take that example, you might think that little boy's sadness over what he couldn't have was irrelevant and could be dismissed. But in fact, he was only little and it was important to him and it was important to his world. He still couldn't have it and he was still going to feel sad about it. But I think that we can acknowledge and take note of the emotion, and that's the important focus of this talk today. I think one of the big questions in the adult mind is how to respond to the emotions of children. We as adults have so much control over our emotions, and we can ignore them if we want to. But generally, emotional literacy and understanding ourselves is a really big step forward in mental health. So for yourself as a parent, as an adult, it's really helpful to just notice your emotional states and respond to them and see what they're telling you about your life, and then be able to move on more successfully. I think we know quite clearly from neuroscience and from general psychotherapeutic theory that if you're just going to ignore emotions all the time, you're probably going to lead to a life that feels pretty hollow, and that in the end might cease to have any meaning. And the thing is this, that our emotions are a signal of our inner life. They are a signal as to how we're feeling. And if you just ignore that, you're not going to have this relationship with your inner life. And mental health is connected to our inner life. I mean, mental health is connected to many factors, behavior and context and relationships. But taking note of our inner life is certainly one of those significant factors. And being able to live with ourselves and understand ourselves and give meaning to our emotion really actually matters. And so this is about how to encourage that in yourself and in your family and in your children. The fact is that our emotions affect us and they affect those around us, just as that little boy's sadness affected me as a stranger just walking by. Our emotions are supposed to affect one another. And that's why sometimes emotion is referred to as affect or our emotional affect. And the net result is that we impact on one another. So if you as a parent perhaps have some very deep emotions going on, it's very likely that at some level your children will read those and respond to those. So that's not to say that you need to feel guilty because you might have big things going on in your life creating emotions, and that's never the intention with mind-kind parenting. It really mind-kind parenting indicates, hey, just take note, see if you can be mindful and manage yourself, and then see if you can then manage your children and see what it is that might be affecting your children. Sometimes we go through things in life that are just going to affect us, really hard things, the kind of things people are going through now, job loss, illness, death, loss. These things are just going to affect us. We cannot get away with it. And so what we need to be able to do is manage those emotions. And a lot of mental health these days is focused on helping people to manage the experience in their body and in their mind. And that's the other thing about emotions. It's not just a mind experience. It's not just a thought. It's an impact. It's a feeling. It's in the body. It's physical. If you're feeling sad, you feel it in your gut. And if you're feeling happy, you feel that in your heart. If you're feeling nervous, you feel that in your stomach. If you're feeling frightened, your whole body will shake. And you'll feel that right throughout your whole body. So this includes the body. It's not just the mind experience. And that's one thing I think that we have to remember. Children are extremely physical little people. They're still feeling everything in their bodies. That's sort of what has been referred to as the somatic nature of the child, the soma being the body. There's a quote from Donald Winnicott, who deeply understood children's emotional lives, and he referred to the somatic nature of children. So a really helpful piece of advice for parents is to give emotion attention. Give it a minute, lend your mind to it in order to increase your own sense of security and well-being, and that of your children's. And I'm going to tell you more about that because parents are always asking me questions about that and the way that perhaps their children's emotions might frustrate them or affect them or make them feel cross or make them feel overwhelmed, which is perfectly natural and normal. And the issue is how I can help parents to regulate and manage their own emotions so that they can help their children regulate and manage theirs too. And ultimately that makes children feel secure, and they will be more stable in their mind and in their body as well. So often parents, when they have new babies, might experience the overwhelming nature of the cry of a baby, and they have to get used to that. But if we think about that cry of the baby, that is the first call. Crying and upset is the first call that a child makes to a parent. And so that starts to tell us about the importance of emotion. It's a call. It says something's going on for me and I need your attention. If you can hold that in mind, that is the purpose of emotion. Something is going on for me. That will help you respond. And then you start to hear other emotions from little babies. By the time they're 6 or 9 months, you might hear them chuckle or laugh, and that says, I'm really that happy and I'm really content. And then as babies develop into toddlers, they start to learn different emotions to try and control their environment. So for example, little 2-year-olds go through what's traditionally called the terrible twos, which is not really so terrible. It's actually a wonderful state where they're starting to get their own little identity and their brains are starting to develop, and they're saying, hey, there's a me here and I want to do what I want. And the emotions that come with that are cross and foot stamping, and it's actually pretty wonderful to see this stage of development, and a little bit overwhelming for parents to have to go through, because children can really act this out. These can be big emotions, and I think parents can start to feel threatened. Have many parents come to me with children of that age and say, what is wrong with my child? Which because they're just so overwhelmed by the rage that their little people might feel. And I have to say, there's nothing wrong. We just need to attend to that, what this little child is saying. Now, that doesn't mean to say, to soothe a little child, you give them their own way all the time. You simply can't do that. That would not be great parenting. But what you have to do is take note and respond and be empathic towards the state of development of the child, the emotion that they're expressing, what it is they're trying to say. And at the end of it, helping them to accept whether the answer is yes or no to that. So it's a big journey. We're not talking about, we've gone from, oh, it's an emotion, to this is massive. This is our lives going on here. This is the lived sense of being alive and the calls of children. Really, the goal of this conversation is to help you as a parent feel calm and peaceful about the emotions that are going to go on with your children, and accepting of those emotions as communications, not as a nuisance, and trying to create an emotional context which is safe and secure, where children are communicating well, and trying to put in a soothing element into your home where children are experiencing dopamine and wonderful soothing chemicals going through their brain because they feel accepted, rather than the cortisol and the angry emotions where children feel misunderstood and rejected. Okay, that's not a perfect process. That's not a perfect thing. Sometimes it might take a few days to understand what on earth the current stage of development your child is going through. And that's okay. I mean, it's not a perfect science, this. It doesn't, the trouble is that you can't box it up. We really love things to be boxed up, don't we? Us logical adults. We want A plus B equals C. And we want to know the end result, and we want it now. And we live in a world that tells us that. But in the emotional lives of children, it's not working like that. It's very fluid. There's a lot of movement there. There's a lot of sensitivity needed. There's a lot of patience needed. There's a lot of focus needed. And these aren't easy things in our busy lives, with parents under pressure, having to work and parent, and then focus their minds on the emotional lives of their children. So I'm not saying this is an easy job, but I'm saying it's a great job if you know what it is you're looking for. Please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And if you can rate the podcast in your podcast app, that will help spread the word and help more parents. So let's look at some questions. So we always answer 4 questions in our podcast, and we start with a lovely one from a couple of parents. That this one particular one was a dad who said, when I take my children to school, I keep hearing the word emotional literacy bandied around by teachers and even by my children. They use this term. And can you please tell me what on earth they are talking about. So I thought this was a wonderful question. So thank you so much. And it's sort of like a new trend, isn't it? I mean, we won't talk about that particular parent, but we'll talk about us generally. There's a generational shift here. So I'm in the grandparent generation, and in my generation, it's just like we all knew that don't bother expressing your emotions because nobody's going to be that interested unless you're absolutely obvious about what it is that's going on. If it's like a great big cry and you've hurt yourself, somebody will probably respond. But anything more subtle than that, nobody's listening. And when I talk to people of grandparent age, that's a very common experience. So, fair enough. We evolved somewhat. And that meant when I was a parent, I was trying to be more literate, and i.e. more understanding, more sensitive to the emotions of my child. And I really struggled with that. I used to, I used to think, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Am I spoiling my child? And so it was never an easy question. And when I talk to people of my age who were parenting, say in the 80s and 90s, we were all kind of ambivalent about emotion. We were bothered and we weren't bothered. Well, we thought we had to listen, and maybe we didn't. But now we've all got children of our own, and so we're talking to parents. Our children are parents now. And what's happened is there's a shift, and the whole world has woken up to the importance of emotional literacy. All that means is listening to emotion. It means listening to emotion in yourself, and listening to emotion in children. So this isn't just happening in schools, where teachers are more thoughtful about the emotions of children. This is happening in business, where directors of companies and personnel departments, HR departments are deeply aware that they need to put their focus on the emotions of the people they work with and employ. If you haven't got a workforce that are feeling great, you're not going to get a good job done. And so it's really become very important in industry and in education that we're listening more carefully to what's going on inside people. So why do we bother to do that? Well, I'm hoping that as you start to do that, you'll find out more of it. Is that actually it works. It makes the world a happier place. It makes the world a more functional place. It makes the world we live in more psychologically functional. As I've said, it creates the right chemicals. It creates contentment and dopamine in us. It gives us a sense of soothing, and it makes us more activated and more motivated. So there's absolute payoffs in the long run. And one wonders how we ever got to the position where we suppressed emotion so very much. We just aren't doing that anymore. So really big thank you to that dad for that lovely, sort of slightly frustrated question that he was asking. What is everybody on about? We're just on about listening to what's going on inside ourselves a little bit more, and we're taking that more seriously. And those are good communications to be listening to. And I hope that you might start giving that a go and see what that means for you. It might raise more questions than answers. And sometimes, and I'm sure that dad would agree with me, sometimes we just have to get on with it, don't we? We might have a morning where we're thinking, I'm feeling deeply insecure and I'm not feeling very happy, but we have a schedule and we have to get on with it. And that's about being a grown-up. I mean, grown-ups can do that quite well. I don't think children can do that so well. And, good for anyone who's just getting on with it. But give your inner life some time at some stage. Be mindful of what is going on for you at some stage in your day. And we live such complex lives that makes such big demands on us. And what starts to happen is that the very last thing that you attend to is your feelings. In fact, you might even end up saying that's totally inconvenient and I don't care. And I think that's a mistake. I think that is a psychological error. And I don't think that's good for us when we do that all the time. These podcasts are based on my book, Mind Kind, Your Child's Mental Health, published by Exile and available on Amazon. You can find the book link in the podcast description. So our second question that a parent has sent in is asking the question, what are the key emotions? I think that's a lovely question, and we might as well get down to the basics here and start to build our knowledge. So thank you so much for asking that. Sometimes we can even forget, can't we? Oh, I don't even know what emotions to look out for. And then sometimes we cannot even know what emotions we're feeling. The fact is, it does help to name those emotions. It helps enormously to be able to have a sense of something going on inside you and to be able to name it, and then have some kind of conversation with yourself about that or with others about that. What we need to do is give some meaning to that emotion. And we need to do that for ourselves. And we need to do that for our children, because those are the ways that we become more competent at managing ourselves. So, for example, if you have a sad start to your day and you say to yourself, well, the meaning of that today is that, well, actually, my best friend is ill and that's really affecting me, and I've got a lot to do and I feel a little bit stressed and that's making me feel a bit wobbly. Well, that's a brilliant explanation, and you might be able to go through the day being more mindful of what it is you need to cope and still get on with your busy schedule. So we are made to give meaning to our lives, and we are made to explain and give meaning to our emotions. It's not always that easy. Sometimes it's really hard to give meaning to emotions, and they can stick around for a long, long time without any meaning. And so, don't worry about that. That's just life too. Sometimes it's really hard to explain things, but there is no doubt that our brains are happier and our children will be happier if we can give meaning to and explain things. So that's why I love this question, because this parent is saying, oh, before I start giving any meaning to any emotion, I need to be able to name it, and I need to be able to know what it is that's going on. So let's name the big four, the big basic emotions that are key to our experience. So they are anger, fear, joy, and sadness. And you're going to be very lucky if you get through your life without feeling any of those. And there are, of course, grades to this. I mean, some people are intensely emotional in their nature and others are less. So it's not a competition. I'm not saying that people who are less emotional are less in any way. It absolutely doesn't matter to what degree you experience your own emotions. In fact, you can experience them a lot less, but you need to be aware that people in the world are having emotions and that will be running their lives. So it's very helpful to know about these things. Let's take fear, okay, because it's a big one. It runs the lives of children, and in fact, it's healthy to feel afraid of some things. So yes, feel afraid of a lorry coming down the road and stay on the pavement. Feel afraid if your friend fights you and is being horrible to you. But sometimes these emotions can get out. If we don't deal with them, they will get out of control. And we find that, children become generally fearful if we are not managing this particular emotion. So fear is a big one because very much is the burner or the fuel that creates anxiety. And the anxiety is simply, again, a message from inside saying something's not right here. I need some help, or I need to make myself safe, or I need to hide, or something like that. And children feel fear a lot. I mean, that is our big job. Little infants feel fear. If you leave them alone for 1 minute, they start to completely lose the plot in their little minds if you leave them alone for any length of time. So this is a really important emotion, as don't ever dismiss fear in children. Just acknowledge it, see what it's telling you, and act on it. That's the thing to do. It's a wonderful emotion. So in your adult world, you need to evaluate this emotion. You need to know when to listen to it and when not to listen to it. And that's the big task. Sometimes that fear trigger can be very overactive, and we can be very avoidant of things we actually need to pay attention to and engage with. So, for example, you might not turn up for an exam that you really have got to do, and you might not turn up for that exam because you're afraid that you'll fail it. And that's where fear will have talked to you a bit too much. On the other hand, if you're driving down the road at 120 miles an hour and you're feeling some fear, then you actually really need to listen to that. So we're evaluating fear. Little children can't do that very well, and teenagers are grappling with that. And we need to help them. We are there to mediate and talk with and help give meaning to this massive emotion that can take over if we're not careful. So we could do a whole podcast on fear. So I might put that on the list of things to do. So let's look at anger, because this is a wonderful emotion. And it's got bad press, really. And we certainly, again, the generational differences emerge here. In my generation, it would have been kind of really wrong to be angry about anything. It was framed wrongly. But anger is just another communication telling you that something's not right. So if your friend hits you, you're going to feel a mixture of either sadness or anger. And there's nothing wrong with feeling anger if somebody does something wrong. If you then go and hit them back, that's a different matter. But teaching children to manage these incredibly powerful negative emotions is a massive task. And if you do that, if you achieve that, you will really be helping them with their lives. And over time, I've worked with many adults who can't manage their anger, and their anger gets out of control. It's a little bit of a beast. It will work harder and harder. Your brain will get used to the cortisol involved in anger, and it will almost invite anger. It's almost like a drug if you're not careful. And so we have to help adults sort of give meaning to their anger and turn that wheel in another direction. But with our children, we need to take note if they're angry. We need to help them manage that. We need to help them know that they can feel angry, but they don't necessarily have to go and do something reactive or aggressive, that something actually needs managing. And if we can bring up children, and again, from school age and until adulthood, who are considering those angry feelings and acting in the right way to deal with them, we will have done very well indeed. And if as parents we can do that, and we can consider the anger we might feel with our children, because there is no doubt our children will make us angry, but if we can manage that in the right way and in a thoughtful way, and in an effective way, then we're going to be really much more powerful, authoritative parents who are really, really helping our children function in the world. And of course, attached to anger are all of those other deep feelings, such as rage, the rage that we feel if things don't get put right, and the frustration that we might feel if we can't achieve our goals, or if we feel that somebody's not doing the right thing to help us. So those are, whilst we have these core emotions, there are all sorts of other emotions attached to them. So we're looking at the core emotions, so joy and sadness are the sort of other side of the coin. Somehow joy is much more accepted. We actually do have a little bit of an out of balance problem there, though, because I think in our incredibly sophisticated society, we tend rather to think that we're entitled to joy all the time. And if we're not feeling joy, then there is a problem. And that is actually not the case. It's unhealthy to feel that you should be promoting joy all the time. it's great to have joy in your life. And it's great to have all the other emotions that attach to it, like contentment, like a sense of peace, and all of those other things that go with that. It's a really important element of well-being. So we have to have some of it. We won't feel joy all the time. When you've got a difficult task to do, you need to focus. You will be challenged, and that life does get difficult. We have loss to deal with, we have challenges to deal with, and you're not going to feel joy at these times. And a lot of people come to therapy. I've seen a lot of people in my clinic who say, I'm just not happy. And I said, well, actually, do you know what? It's great. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's making you unhappy. But it's actually, to survive, you don't have to feel happy all the time. And it can end up as a little bit of a trap if you're not careful, that you promote happiness. As parents, we do that. We desperately want our children to be happy, and that can really lead to bad habits. You can let them have their own way because you want them to be happy, and that's a real mistake. Of course you want to promote happiness, it's your primary job. But sometimes kids are going to be really fed up with us because we say no, and we stop them from doing exactly what they want all the time. And there's the big trick of parenting, is finding that balance. You can't make the children happy all the time, but you can help them manage themselves, and you can help them feel acceptance to what is real in the world. The other side of feeling joy is that we are going to feel sad at times in our lives. And I think I've seen a lot of sadness in people towards the end of 2020 and towards 2021. There's a lot of grief through loss, and there's a lot of sadness through the loss of our freedom, and a lot of upset and fear and sadness from people struggling with work and businesses crashing. There's a lot of difficulty. So we are going to see this more. The thing is that this emotion in itself is a message that things aren't right, and that something's difficult. And the skill is to be able to accept that, engage with that, and give meaning to that. And sadness won't kill you. It's just help you live your life according to what is going on now. Well, actually, in very extreme cases, someone might be so very sad that they can't live with themselves. And that is obviously a very extreme and very sad experience. But if we manage this sadness, and if we're able to accept it and live with it, we should do well enough, and we should get through. And everyone listening to this podcast will have experienced sadness in their lives. I've had times of sadness when I have felt as if I am like a sponge that's being with water being squeezed out, where I've had so many tears over sad events. And here I am, still alive and still talking about it. All that really matters at those times are that you don't feel isolated, are that people connect with you if you want them to. And also the other side of that is that you have time to yourself to grieve and feel sad if that's the right thing at that time for you. It's a matter of judgment, and it's a matter of experimenting with what's right to get you through. So these are the basic emotions. And I hope you're getting the key message now is that these emotions enrich our lives. They give meaning to our lives. They give power to our lives. And it's really valuable to encompass them and let them in and accept them and act on them if we need to. There are many, many more states of emotion that we experience. And again, it's another whole podcast, and I will do that and go through these different states. So, for example, disgust is an emotion. That's such an important emotion. If something disgusts you, it means step away. It means keep yourself safe. You don't like that. Good, fantastic emotion. Children are really quick with that one, aren't they? And they very quickly make facial expressions, and they make sounds that indicate they're disgusted. And it means step away, keep yourself safe. And shame is a very, very big emotion that children experience very easily. And, we need to think, as parents, we need to think about shame. It's an important emotion. It teaches us to do the right thing, because none of us like to be ashamed. But if you shame children too much, you destroy them. You make them feel so bad and so guilty that they can't do anything. So a shameless child could be a difficult child, and a child with too much shame could equally, just find it so hard to hold on to a good life. So we need to be really careful. Don't overshame your child, but certainly let them know when that social emotion is saying, you got something wrong, you need to put it right. And another big one that, again, it gets terribly bad press and we don't think about it enough, is the emotion of jealousy. If you think about jealousy, a lot of our social world is completely motivated by jealousy. So clothes, presentation, cars are all sold on the basis of creating envy. And I'm not judging that. That fair enough. But we need to know our envy. And again, it's a two-sided sword. That envy can motivate us. It can motivate us to go and get a lovely dress if we are envious of the way somebody's dressing. We want to make ourselves feel good too. On the other hand, it can destroy us. It can make us absolutely, totally do the wrong thing and be totally materialistic, getting too much. So you'll never be able to feed the envy monster enough if you're so wound up with it. And it could indicate that you might be a really secure person if you're envious of everything around you. So most of these emotions are incredibly powerful, but they're double-edged. And I always say to parents with envy, if your child says they're very envious of something that another child has, I will say, well, that's a great conversation, isn't it? Let's talk about how we feel about what other people have, because that's always going to be going on. And at the same time, let's not get carried away with thinking we've got to have the same thing as other people have all the time, or look the same the same way that other people feel, or dress the same way, or be the same way, or have the same level of intelligence as other people, or have the same gifts or the same prowess. Human beings are going to have to live with that one. And so it's a really great one to talk about with your children to help them manage their lives. Please email me your questions. There's a link in the podcast description. Don't worry, I won't use names or personal examples. I will collate the information and create general questions for each episode under a different topic. Let's move on to another question now. So a lovely question from a parent that just said, honestly, what's the best way to do this? Just tell me how to do this. And I think that's a lovely question, isn't it? And I respect any parent that just wants to know, give me some rules that I can get this right. So good. Thank you for writing in with that question. About 10 years ago, I developed a model called the 5 R's. That's R for rules, if you like. And if you stick to this model, you can't go far wrong. I mean, I would say to parents, stick it on your fridge, or stick it on a cupboard, or put it somewhere to remind you. When you're hearing emotion from your children, think of these words. So we're there to receive the emotion. We're there to help regulate the emotion. We're there to help resolve any problems or help the child resolve their own problems, which would be better. We're there to repair any damage, harm, or pain. And then we have to repeat the whole thing all over again, because the problem with parenting is you have to do a lot of this. So you might think, oh, I've just done that. I've just done the 5 R's. And it's just like, oh, and it's lunchtime now. I did that at breakfast. Then here it is again. And yes, you're right. You have to do it again. And if you've got more than one child, you have to do it probably, times more. And that's really tough. So measure yourself and take it easy. There is a 6 R, and that is that there is a routine around these things. And one of my lovely students gave me the R number 6 on routine and helped us think together about how children get in their minds this cycle of behavior of the 5 rules. And they go, oh, I'm feeling really upset. I know. I'll go to my mum and she'll receive that. She'll accept that. As a mum or a dad, you might say, or a parent, you might say, do you know what? I really heard that. I'll get back to you in a few hours. You might need to put a time frame on it. You might not be free straight away, unless, of course, it's deeply serious. So, give yourself a chance. You don't have to be on the job straight away. So you receive that, then a child gets used to that. I know my mum or my dad or my parent will receive that, and that feels good. That's security. And then you regulate that, is that you give the child the soothing that they need. And if they're upset or if they're angry, how do you regulate that? You just acknowledge it, you name it. You name it in order to be able to tame it. Name the emotion to tame the emotion. And then you help them resolve when they're ready, once the emotional state is over, and only once the emotional state is over, you start to get a little bit more logical. So if you've got a child crying, or if you've got a child in fear, or you've got a child angry, or don't try to get logical. Just name the emotion, and then as they resolve that state and it settles down, you will find they're in a fit state of mind to deal with, how should we do this then? What should we do about this? Or how should we think about this? And that's the resolve part. Or the repair part, which is going to be, what is it that you as a parent might need to put right? And ultimately what we're heading towards is helping our children to be able to manage this cycle in themselves as they get older. But don't expect that from young children, please. Don't, when we get to teenager, you might be seeing if children can manage this for themselves. But for little kids, they absolutely need your help. That's a really important point. Don't expect your children to resolve their own emotions. That is the wrong direction to go in. If you help your children to resolve their own emotions, you're going in the right direction. And I'll explain why in a minute. So then you expect to repeat it. You might be bored, but repeat it anyway. Several times a day, and then several times a week, and then start to feel the routine of that. Start to feel the circularity of that. Start to feel the completion of emotions, beginning, middle, and end. Start to feel this, then complete in the child's mind. You're making them stronger every time you do that. Remember that you are making your child stronger every time that you work through the 5 rules or the 6 rules with them. And here they are one more time. Receive, regulate, resolve, repair, repeat, and get into routine. Please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And if you can rate the podcast in your podcast app, that will help spread the word and help more parents. So let's go on to our 4th and final question of this particular podcast. Fantastic question. If I keep responding to my child's emotions, will they ever get strong? Won't I just be making them weak? How do I make my child more resilient? A fantastic question. Curious parent saying, hang on a minute, if I keep putting in all of this hard work, how are they going to be resilient? And I think that's a really great thing for us to be thinking about. The fact is this, that as children develop, you can start to expect them to be more resilient, but you have to put in the work for them to be resilient. And here is a rule, and it comes out of research, and it is this, that if you support a child in their life with their life events, they will be stronger than if you just leave them and don't support them. Support is the key word. So the 5 rules that I just told you about in the last question are rules that will help your child be emotionally resilient and stable in their lives. Now, you might not see that at first. You're not going to see that with a little 2-year-old who will continuously need that input. A 5-year-old will continuously need that input. Children in middle childhood, so 7 to 14, they continuously need that input. And gradually you'll see little pieces of them relying on themselves. Self-reliance, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of well-supported children. So don't be afraid to support your child, but help them on the road to thinking for themselves. They won't understand how to name an emotion and give meaning to an emotion if you're not teaching them and showing them how to do that. So there's a real key principle here, and that is the principle of modeling, and how parents model behavior And children copy that all the time. As they get older, you can start to help them think for themselves a little bit, but they're still going to need your support. If you think about, say, if you've got older teenage children, the average 18-year-old, 16 to 18-year-old, they vacillate, don't they, between being a helpless child needing to be cuddled and be an extremely autonomous young person who couldn't care less whether they had your help or not. And that's a wonderful example of them heading towards autonomy and resilience. And the work that you put in when they are little, between the ages of 0 and 5, and then again from middle childhood onto their teen years, that work that you put in, that incredibly, frankly, tedious repetition of support is what is going to take you to the autonomous teenager. So I do see this a lot, and I'll name it. I think it's a mistake, to expect little children to be managing their own emotions. They need your help, they need your mind, and they need your thoughts. The rule is that supporting a child to work with their own emotions is never going to weaken them, and it will very probably strengthen them. And it will increase the bond between you, so the child will feel they can rely on you, and children need to rely on parents. That's the really important rule in life. So this completes our podcast on emotional literacy. I hope it's going to be useful. It's been great talking to you. All of this information is in the book Mind Kind. You can find the book link in the podcast description. Next time I talk to you, I'm going to be talking about how to create secure children, and I'm really looking forward to that. Take care. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get in touch or have questions for future episodes, please email me. There is a link in the podcast description.